I'm going to keep monitoring the chat. My name is Lori McDowell. I handle marketing for Dave, and I'm going to be sort of keeping track of the back end today. If anybody has any trouble, just send me a chat. If you have any questions throughout today, please send a chat. Thank you, Ross. This is David Liddell. He's going to be hosting our webinar today. He is the founder, CEO, president of Liddell Consulting Group. He has been helping leaders for more than 20 years, and I understand this difficult conversations topic is going to be an interesting one today. So thank you so much for joining. Dave, take it away.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. We had a wonderful turnout for this particular workshop webinar. Interesting. We get a mix of responses from webinar to webinar, and this one in particular had quite the draw. So there must be something behind it. Difficult conversations are, well, let's say they're difficult, and there's reasons for that. I would say, sometimes we don't know how to give the feedback. We are apprehensive. It creates, we're fearful it could create some confrontation. And I think the important thing to think about here is that feedback and difficult conversations, they do go together. And the idea is we have to do it. It's necessary. It's a helpful component. And we all have the skills to do it. And I think in today's environment where we have different generations, multiple facets to how we operate, hybrid work, how do we do it? How do we do it effectively? So there's so the dynamic nature of where we live today, I think, is something that we have to really consider. So let me dig into the specifics of the program today. I'm going to move forward, and because we have an hour, we're going to end right on time. I'm going to move through things quickly. Now, if you do have questions, I'm going to suggest that you put them in the chat. Lori's going to be monitoring that, and we're going to have a section at the end as well. So we're going to move through it, but do post your questions, and we'll make sure we get to all of them at the end of today's session. So let's talk about today's talking points. The first one will be about the impact of avoiding it. There are certainly consequences that come with that. And then we'll move into some effective communication strategies. And this is not a one-time fix-all type conversation. There's various aspects to delivering feedback and having those difficult conversations. We want to talk about the strategies, and then when you're in the moment, how do you actually manage the conversation? And that has a lot to do with you and where you come from. And then, of course, we need to think about the overall culture of your organization, either your team, your organization. If we have a healthy culture that encourages feedback, that's certainly a good thing. So let's talk about the impact of avoiding critical feedback. I think one of the biggest things, if we think about teams today, now if you think of it in any organization, we have departments, we have teams, we have project teams, we have ad hoc teams. We achieve everything through working together. Yes, individuals work hard on their own, but it's we have to come together to make things happen. And the lack of feedback in a team environment, it does decrease team performance. How do you get better? The only way to get better is to provide each other feedback, or in many cases today, in today's conversation, people's filter might be, well, I need to give feedback to my people. How do I do that? Well, as a team leader or a manager of any organization or department or team, you have to give feedback. And if we don't provide it, we do limit the performance of individuals and collectively as teams. It can lead to low morale. If you think about today's workforce, we have multi-generations today. What I'll call the newest generation, the younger generation, they really do want feedback, believe it or not. Some people struggle with it more than others, but people do want feedback. And if we're not getting it, and feedback can be positive, meaning what they're doing well as as negative or constructive feedback, but people do want feedback. And if we're not getting it, people can become disconnected, disengaged, and that overall can lead to low morale. So we do want to think hard about that. It also does provide, missed opportunities for growth. If we think about ourselves as leaders in an organization, it's really, really important to recognize that we are mentors, we are coaches, and we could go back many, many years, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, when management leadership was a little different. It was a little more top down, a little more command and control. The environment we're in today is leaning towards something a little more dynamic, and I'm not saying coddling. I think some of you might be thinking, well, I don't want to have to coddle people, and I'm not suggesting that either. But we do need to mentor and coach people to achieve. Coaches, any sort of coach, I don't care if you're in a sport, a business, whatever that might mean, you are there to help people grow in their position, challenge themselves, and advance, develop themselves faster than they develop on their own. And if we don't provide that feedback, those are clearly missed opportunities. And I think about mentoring and coaching as a very deliberate thing, that you understand the person, you think about their capabilities, their strengths, and in essence, we have to think about, how do I move this person forward? So this is where feedback can be extremely valuable. And of course, how we do that, which I'm going to talk about in just a moment, is really important. And then, of course, generally, it can cause relationship strain. We do hear about challenges in the workplace. Some people get along with one another, some don't. Oftentimes, there can be passive aggressive behavior. People don't give feedback oftentimes because it's viewed as painful, or it's going to be confrontational. Most people struggle with confrontation, and it's not because they don't want to do it, but it makes them uncomfortable. If we take the time, if we are deliberate with giving feedback, it does help with our relationships. There has to be a give and take, especially in a professional environment. And if it's done well, it works great. But again, there is the tendency for many of us to say, well, I'll get to that later. I'll get to that later. Okay, well, that's not a great idea. We have to work together. And I'll give you some techniques on how to do that and what that really means. So let me just talk a little bit about the effective use of feedback. And if you're not familiar with this model on the screen here, this is called the Johari window, and it's really designed to help people understand how feedback can be used and why it is so important. If you look at the four quadrants, you've got the public area, the blind area, the hidden area, and the unknown area. And it's quite simple. I know there's a lot of words on the screen here, but it is quite simple. If you think about on the outside of the boxes, what is known to self and what is unknown to self, that's at the top, that's on the horizontal axis. And then on the vertical axis, you've got unknown to others and known to others. So if you look at those, so the known to others, known to self quadrant, the public area, is simply that. You know what your capabilities are, people see it, that's good. But you could have a blind spot. It could be something that, you're not aware of, a particular behavior that you're not aware of is causing a problem. So that might be known to others, but unknown to yourself. So the idea here is to minimize that blind area. And what that means is you need feedback, right? If you are open to it. Now, if you're not open to it, you're going to have blind spots. And we certainly hear that term. You'll also hear people use the term, they don't know what they don't know, right? And that comes in different facets as well. But the idea here is if you're accepting of feedback and people are willing to give it to you, meaning you need to be open to it, you're reducing your blind area. Now, if we go into the hidden area spot, essentially what that means is, you're willing to disclose about yourself, or you're willing to give feedback. And that is, how are you feeling? Are you sharing information about others to them so that they understand? So those are things that we also want to reduce the hidden areas. So the idea there is we have to make sure that we are giving and receiving feedback effectively. So essentially your public area is growing. I know this is a bit of a psychology exercise here, but it's really important to understand that if we don't expand that public area, that unknown area, which is oftentimes the hidden potential we have, does not get disclosed, does not get opened up. And it's a huge, huge issue if we're not thinking about this in the context of we have to give feedback to drive the performance of people and teams in an organization. And if we do it well, okay, if we do it well, then we have a wonderful opportunity to impact the organization, build a stronger culture, build stronger performance. I believe the biggest untapped potential that we have in any business, any organization, is the people. We spend millions and millions of dollars on equipment and rent for buildings and all the things that we need to run the business. But the undiscovered potential is in the people that we have already today. And the people who are coming in, let's make sure we give them what they need. And much of that comes in the form of feedback. All right, let's go to the second topic here. So we got to think about effective communication strategies. And some of these are going to be straightforward, obvious, but there's some nuances that come with it that I think some of us forget or we don't think about it. And especially when we're in the moment of communicating, giving feedback, I think is best face to face, person to person. Second best might be through video. And when you have remote workers, that might have to be the case. I always resist or suggest that you don't give feedback just over the phone or through an email, or definitely not through a text. It loses context. But let's talk about these four different strategies. So the first one is we want to be clear and specific about feedback. And I know that sounds obvious, but I have witnessed people giving feedback, and there's this hesitance to be direct and to the point and be specific about what you see going on. Now, this can happen in both directions, whether it's constructive, something to improve upon, or affirmative, something that they're doing well. Be specific about what it is. And it is not, and I'm going to just kind of touch on that second point. It's not about the person as much as it's about the behavior. But we want to be very, very specific, and because people can digest information in reasonable chunks. If we load people up too much, it might be too much to process and then validate themselves. So the second point here, focus on behavior, not personality, absolutely critical. You don't want to criticize a human being, a person. But if there are certain behaviors or actions that you see happening, you certainly can say, I'd like to see that change. Or similarly, I'd like you to continue to do that. That is a great behavior. That's exactly what we need. That's the type of thing we're looking for. So let's make sure that we're looking at evidence-based feedback. So if you're getting, for instance, if you hear something, someone comes to you with, this person, I'm struggling, what do we do? And you have to talk to that person. Make sure you've done your homework and you realize or you recognize that the information you might be getting may not be 100% true. Validate it. Make sure you're clear on what's going on. And it's better if you actually witness it or have concrete evidence to say, yes, this person is doing this. I need to help them correct it. And there's also another thing to consider here. The motive behind giving people feedback is not to just give them crap. It isn't. The goal, the motive behind feedback is to help them improve, to help them grow. So really, really important. Now, this third bullet, it says balance positive and negative feedback. I want to start this point with saying, avoid the sandwich method. Okay, this is just me. This is my opinion. But I've heard people say, well, if you got to give somebody critical feedback, say something positive, say something critical, and then give them something positive. I personally believe that is patronizing. These are professionals. These are grown adults. These are people who should be able to handle feedback. Now, in my point here, balance it. If you have positive feedback to give them, affirmative, saying that was the great way you handled that situation, or this report or this work was absolutely outstanding, give them the positive affirmative feedback, and then full stop. That's it. You don't have to give them anything more. When you need to give them constructive feedback, give them constructive feedback. Focus in the moment on that. If you, over time, are giving affirmative, positive feedback and negative feedback over time, the person receiving it will see you as a valid source of feedback because you're giving both. If you're only giving negative feedback, that could be a problem. If that's all you do is focus on the negative, there's opportunities to find people winning. So that's my point here. And so again, avoid the sandwich method. I just don't think it works that well. I think people are too smart today. They look right through it. Just be honest and be genuine about what you're trying to do. All right. Encouraging dialogue. Let's talk a little bit about that. Now, I know when you're giving feedback, you have a point. You're trying to ensure that the individual is receiving valuable information that they can use to either repeat what they need to be doing or make corrective action. But there should be some degree of back and forth, some dialogue. And I'm going to talk more about that in the next slide. And dialogue really is a two-way conversation. When it comes to communication, I think it's important for the person communicating to recognize you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen twice as much. Now, I know if you have to deliver information, you're going to be talking, but leave room for listening and understanding. Now, if a person becomes defensive, that's okay, but that's part of the dialogue and making sure that they absorb it and accept it in a way that will be digestible. Let's think of it in those terms. So let me talk a little bit about dialogue. And this is a model I use when I work with leaders and helping them with influential communication. So you'll see here at the bottom of the illustration on the left side here, you'll see it says mutuality, and the definitions are on the right. So it's really about building trust, mutual respect, goodwill. And that may not be just in the moment, that could be over time. If you're going to give feedback to somebody, you have to make sure that between you, there is a reasonable amount, the right amount of trust and respect. I tell leaders, look, people don't have to like you. It's a bonus, okay? If they like you, it's good. First, they have to trust and respect you. And that comes from your actions, how you live your life, how you lead by example, and things that you do to build trust with your people, and certainly your colleagues. If you think about the people that you trust most in your life today, you're willing to listen to them because you trust them. If they have a difficult message to share with you, you're willing to listen to them because they trust you, and vice versa. That's really important. So this mutuality piece is something you work on over time, but you also have to validate. If you give someone feedback and it's not received well, and you think you've done a good job, the answer might be, oh, maybe my relationship with this person is not as good as I thought it was, meaning trust and respect. Now, the pool of shared understanding, which is the combination of inquiry and advocacy, right? So when you're giving feedback, you're advocating for your point of view. I need to share something with you. But you also want to encourage people to share their thoughts. And that is, this model is used not only for feedback, it's used for any sort of communication. But those people who are good listeners, meaning truly listen to understand, are viewed at a much higher level than those who don't listen well or aren't viewed as listening well. And it's a skill. You got to pay attention. You have to encourage some conversation, some dialogue. You have to be open to listening, and not just listening, but to learning and understanding the person's point of view. That combination allows good things to happen. And that's the synergistic component, the win-win. Okay, coming out of the back end, when giving feedback, there's a mutual trust. There's an agreement that the person's understood, you've understood them, And then there's an action that's going to come out of it, a commitment from the individual that they're going to make a change. And they're going to do it mostly for themselves, hopefully, if the conversation goes well, but they're also going to do it because they want to maintain a strong, healthy relationship with you, the person delivering the message. So if we can do some of these things, it makes these difficult conversations not as difficult. I'm not going to say these conversations are going to be easy, but the more skillful you are delivering these messages, the more effective you're going to be. And over time, they become easier and easier because you know yourself, you think about the people you might have to give feedback to. And you might say, well, yeah, this person, no problem. But you might cringe and say, oh, this person's going to be really difficult. All right. And everybody's different. You have to consider your audience in everything that you do. All right. Let me move on to the third point. All right. So let's talk about when you're in the moment. And much of this has to do with your mindset, right? We all come to the table with preconceived notions and perceptions, ideas. We have to recognize that as individuals, we have our own world, our own paradigm of thinking, right? It comes from our upbringing, our cultural values, our perception of people, perception of particular individuals. So we can't ignore that. That's a big piece of giving feedback, is recognizing that you've got a story going on in your own head. And let's make sure you're honest with yourself, honest about the situation, you validated things effectively. So this first point is prepare thoroughly. And I think what you have to think about here is, all right, who is this person? How might they react? How strong is my relationship? What is their style? Are they the detailed type? Are they going to react quickly? And I know this might sound like a lot of work, but it really doesn't take that much time to just pause and think about, okay, how can I do this? How am I going to deliver this message to this person in this situation to make it as effective as possible? And that's where, as we think about individuals, we know each person is going to be very, very different. And then you got to be dynamic in the moment, but do think hard about this, that people are going to respond different ways, and you have to be prepared to deal with that response. All right. Now, I mentioned early, 2 ears, 1 mouth, listen twice as much, but listening actively is a skill that can be learned. And I know, in a busy working environment, demand-driven, deadline-driven, it's not easy to actually slow down and listen. And for some of us with different styles, some of us are very fast-paced and don't have that degree of patience. I tend to fall in that category, so I have to work really hard at it myself. You have to check yourself. Really, you do. You have to recognize that my pace, my impatience could build up, and I have to make sure that I am actually listening. And active listening, it really comes in a few different ways. It's hearing the words, hearing the meaning behind the words, because there is meaning behind the words often. Some people, if they become emotional in a situation, their words, as they're talking with you, can have an impact on how they respond. And you also have to look at their body language. You have to listen with your eyes, if that makes sense. Look at what's happening. More than 90% of communication is body language and tone. Less than 10% are the actual words, believe it or not. And you don't have to trust me. You can do your own research on that. I've been doing this a long time, and it's valid. It really is. The words are just the words. If you have a stern tone versus a friendly tone or an encouraging tone, you have your body language is rigid and crossed arms to that, something to that effect. But you got to read their body language. How are they receiving it? Now, there are people out there that are not very demonstrative. It's hard to read them. That's where it's really paying attention. And you have to think about, how am I doing? How is this coming across? So active listening in itself is like I said earlier, it is a skill, that you have to evaluate as you're going through this. And if you don't, you could get yourself into a little bit of a challenge as you move through the process. All right, let's talk about the next bullet here, which is maintaining professionalism. And professionalism, I don't think that should be an issue for all of us, but I think we have to remember that your emotions may come into this. I'm going to get into the manage emotions in a minute, but we have to remember that you're not going after a person. You have to recognize what your motives are, as we stated earlier. And that professionalism is really focused on one major thing. Your focus is to do what's best for the operation, whether it's the person, the team, meaning the person in terms of their professional development, whether it's the team, the overall team performance, or the morale of the team or the tempo of the team. You're thinking about the organizational performance. So what's your motive behind this? This is, we have to create an environment that's great for everyone. If someone needs feedback that is holding them back, then they're holding the team back, and ultimately they're holding the organization back. So make sure that that you validate in your own mind, why am I doing this? What is the purpose behind this? So that will certainly help in the process. And I know I'm sure some past we'll call it luggage, or depending on your relationship with the person. I'm making this sound easy, but it's not, because the relationships you have and have developed over the years, sometimes there's old baggage that comes with this, old situations. You've developed a perception about a person. You have to work hard to clean that slate, to say, wait a minute, what's my goal here? What am I trying to achieve? And I think in all of this, delivering feedback, you have to remember in yourself, what am I trying to achieve here? What outcome do I want to get? And outcomes are, you want the person to accept the feedback, you want the person to acknowledge that it's something that they can work on, you want to see action come from it, and you want to see performance improvement from it. So if you think about that as your ultimate goal, then you have to make sure how you deliver that will produce that result, right? So if you accidentally got angry or blurted something out that was, I'll just make something up, well, you're kind of lazy, hey, that's not going to go well. Now, I'm not suggesting anyone's going to do that, but there have been situations that I have actually witnessed in my 22 years of doing this, that I've seen things get out of hand. So that professionalism is critical. Obviously, the emotions, you're a human being. We are all emotional people, by far. Now, some of us demonstrate or are more demonstrative with our emotions than others. Some of us wear it on our sleeve. Some of us are very stoic. And then there's people in between. I think it's important to recognize that everything you do and all information you receive or situations you're in, you process emotionally. And that's not my opinion. That's fact. That's a biological thing. And that's how you process it. And then your intellectual brain says, okay, let's do something with this. And this is where we've heard the term emotional intelligence. That's where this comes in. It helps people recognize that I have to be in control of my emotions, and I have to recognize what they are. They are what they are. Okay. I'm not saying you shouldn't feel a certain way. You're going to feel the way you do. The key is recognizing what your emotions are, what they're doing, and thinking about, now, do I have them in check? Am I recognizing how my emotions might impact my response, or how I work with somebody, or how I give feedback? And especially when they start sharing, or you give them through dialogue, give them the opportunity, making sure that you keep that in check. Because your emotions can get, because you might think, hey, this is the third time I've had this conversation with this person. You might get fed up. You might lose your patience. That emotion can drive you to perhaps do the wrong thing. So we want to avoid that. We want to keep that in check. So let me talk a little bit about emotional intelligence. The term has been around a long time. There's a couple of great books out there. This particular illustration on the screen comes from book called Emotional Intelligence 2.0. If you're at all interested, I think I actually have it on the shelf here. Hang on one second. I meant to grab this. If you can see this, it's right here. It's a very, very thin book, very small, very easy to read. It's wonderful. If you're not familiar with the term, essentially it comes down to two basic elements. It's understanding yourself, self-awareness, self-management, and then two, the awareness of the situation, meaning social awareness and relationship management. And that's what you can see on the screen here. And really what it allows you to do is recognize that if I can think dynamically about what's going on in a situation, and I'm aware. So if you look at the quadrant top left, self-awareness. So if I am self-aware and I have clarity on what's going on in my mind, what might be driving it, and then you can recognize that the management component, the self-management is okay, good. I recognize what's going on. I can manage my emotions and my actions that come with it. That's in the context of the social awareness, meaning what is actually happening around me? Am I recognizing what's happening in a group, the group dynamic, the team dynamic, or with an individual that's one-on-one? Do I recognize what's happening there? And then, of course, that relationship component, right? We have to build relationships over time. We build trust and respect with people over time. It doesn't happen right away. You meet someone for the very first time, they may not trust you at all because they don't know you. Another person might trust you a lot because they're just a very trusting person. We don't know. We have to build relationships over time. So this concept, although it sounds for some people, they don't like the term and say, well, it sounds a little bit arbitrary. It's really not. And it's really a function of understanding yourself, managing yourself in the context of a situation. And especially when you're giving feedback to people, you have to recognize that there's a lot going on there. You have your perception of the situation, your intention. As you're delivering the message, the person receiving has their perception based on their own lens, how they see the world, and then how they perceive, and then what do they do with it? They're going to respond in kind. I know I'm kind of throwing a lot of things at this at one time, but the idea is let's make sure we're, at bottom line, paying attention. We understand what's happening here. We recognize what's going on there, and we're focusing on the outcome. And the outcome is helping people grow and learn about themselves. Actually, learn about themselves and grow would be a better way to put it. All right. All right, let's get into the last point here. And I might be moving on a little quickly, but I got a few slides, so we'll have some time for questions at the end. Let's talk about building a feedback of culture. And we talk about culture simply. Culture, climate in an organization are one and the same generally. I'm not going to get into the nuances too much, but the culture is, what's the experience like? What's it like to work in my company, on my team, with my manager? What's the experience I feel? That's what culture is all about. And when I get into how culture really works, I think you'll certainly appreciate it. But as leaders in organizations, now this could be you. This is the culture you create as a leader with the people around you. And this is the first point here. Lead by example. If you're somebody who is open to feedback yourself, very likely people will be open to receiving feedback from you. If you are someone who's on transmit all the time, if you've ever spoken into a walkie-talkie or a VHF radio on a boat, when you click that button, you're on transmit. You cannot hear anybody. Well, I work with some leaders, and I'm helping them work with some leaders. Their thumb is always on the button. They're rarely listening. They're rarely getting feedback. So what we have to do is lead by example, so people see us as equal to them in receiving feedback. And we have to look at it, not just them giving us feedback, but getting feedback in general about what's happening in the business, or suggestions, Are you open-minded? And so this is all about, how do I create an environment where people feel more comfortable, where I feel more comfortable giving feedback? As I said in the very beginning, most people, I would say the mass majority of people, are uncomfortable. When I do talks, I will ask people in an audience to raise their hand. How many people really enjoy giving constructive feedback? And very few hands go up. And even though for those who go up, I'll validate and say, well, do you like it, or are you good at it because you practiced it? And most of them will say, no, I worked hard at it to be able to do it well. But most people are uncomfortable because it feels like confrontation, and it does not have to be confrontational, especially if we're building a culture where everybody says, I want it. I talked earlier about the newest generation in the workforce. They really do want feedback, but they want the good and the bad, right? They want to know, how am I doing? Am I doing well? What am I doing well? And can I get better? And again, everyone's a little different. I'm generalizing here, but that's the idea. So, but if we lead by example, we set a positive example as leaders ourselves, we're going to do far better. The second bullet, this is not because I'm trying to get business from you. Provide people training. You're here for a reason. You want to learn how to do it. And as much as it has its nuances and complexities, it's not that difficult if we just think through the process. But provide people training on how to give feedback, and then they are better armed. If you don't give people the tools, then it's more difficult to do the job. They'll figure it out, but they might be using the wrong tool, or no tool at all. How do we do that? There's a good way and a better way, sometimes a bad way of doing it. I've seen people do it poorly, not intentionally, but poorly. So we want to give people training on how to give feedback, and much of it is what we've talked about today, making sure that as an individual, you understand where you're coming from, what your goals are, and then the pathway between the two is the method, is the tools that you use. And these are communication tools more than anything else. On how to be effective at giving feedback. And if we do that, we create a stronger culture. All right, let's talk about the third one, create safe spaces. And if we think about giving feedback, it's easy to give constructive feedback in a group setting. If someone does something well, and you as the leader says, hey, that was great, really loved that, I love the way you handled it, specifically, I liked X. Most people are going to enjoy that because they're being called out publicly in a positive sense. Some people don't like that spotlight, so you got to be careful. You got to know those people, but that's easy to do. If you have to give constructive feedback, default to never, ever doing it in public. Always find a safe space for the person so they don't feel as though there's a public spotlight focused on them. Unfortunately, I've seen leaders dress down people in a public forum. It never works, ever. It does not work. Even if you're trying to make a point, don't do it. It sheds a poor light on you as the communicator. It makes you look less professional. You will lose trust and respect of people doing that. Now, I think some of you are going, yeah, of course, Dave. Of course, I'm not going to do that. At the same time, I just want to make the point clear that it's critically important. So what does that mean? Don't necessarily pull them into your office. Make it safe in terms of presenting the situation, what your intentions are. This is not a reprimand. This is about helping you grow. I want to think about the future. I want to think about your growth. If you can do it in person, which I think is best, find a conference room, find a neutral location. The environment does mean something. Or if you got to go, hey, let's go for a coffee, or let's go for a walk. Something that creates a neutral environment. If it has to be done in your office, fine, but try to find a desk in the corner of your office if that exists to do it. Not you behind your desk. It puts you in this position of authority, and it may come across the wrong way. Now, I know you're thinking, well, gee, Dave, I am the boss or I am the manager. I'm gonna, that's the situation sometimes. I get it. I'm just trying to give you some tips that I think will make it work more effectively. And then the final point here is recognizing and rewarding feedback. And, that's as simple as paying attention. If we think about an environment that you want to create, what are you trying to do? You're trying to create a certain set of attitudes, which are beliefs and behaviors that create the environment that you want. And if you want people accepting feedback, but also providing feedback even to one another, that creates a much, much better environment where learning, growth, continuous improvement. Most organizations are saying we've always got to improve. It's one of those things we have to do to stay ahead of our competition, or to achieve our growth goals, or to achieve our organizational goals. Whatever it is, we have to do it. So I think it's important to recognize that we need to look for those behaviors that are creating that culture. And in this case, we're talking about the feedback element of it. Let's make sure we recognize when people are doing those things, let them know. And it's as simple as catching people winning, doing the right things, and acknowledging it. And you don't have to do it publicly. You can just pull someone aside and say, hey, that was great. That was really good feedback, wonderful. Or if it's coming your way and someone needs to give you feedback, you say, that was great. I needed that. That's something that was useful to me. Thank you. Now, if it's not useful information, you can say, hey, I'll take it into consideration. But those are the sorts of things I want you to think about, that if we, broadly create a culture where people exist and feel comfortable, then that's what it's all about. Just like you think, we all have different families, right? Family dynamics. You might walk into one house family and the dynamics completely different than another family. Well, that's just normal. It's no different. It's now you have a lot more people likely. You might have a family, a small family, 5 to 10 people total with aunts and uncles. Well, you might have 20, 30, 50, 100 people in an office setting, that dynamic, and you're going to have micro dynamics. But let's think about that. So let me talk a little bit about what culture really is and what it isn't. And you can think about this. So the iceberg approach, 10 to 15% of the iceberg is above the water, the rest is below. And that's no different than culture, right? And culture, if you look at, we've got the iceberg above, which is this. And if you think about, this is the way we say things get done. We talk about our values, we talk about our company strategy, we talk about our policies, our goals. This is our structure, this is our vision. These are the behaviors we'd like to have. You'll see oftentimes in organizations posters of these are our values. Great, those are stated items that you want to live up to. That's the stated culture. But the reality is, it's the culture, it's the way things are really done. Okay, so it's the values in people's minds. There's assumptions, there's beliefs. You can't mandate beliefs. You can shape them, but you can't mandate them. You can't say you will believe X. No, it doesn't happen that way. There are stories, past stories. Oh, we always did it this way. This is the way it really works. So imagine, you're driving down the highway, and we know what the rules are on the highway. There's speed limits. There's solid lines, dotted lines. There's things we should signal when we change lanes. These are all the rules. Okay, that's this. Now, when you're on the highway, how many people are obeying the speed limit? How many people are actually signaling when they change lane? That's the culture. That's what it really is. So, do you want to be so rigid that people follow the rules exactly the way you want them to? It's going to be very difficult, but it's important to state what you want and then encourage the behaviors that get you to what you want it to be. And I think that's the important piece here, that if we're not thinking in these terms, then you may have a culture that does not support feedback. You may have a culture that people react poorly, or they push back, or they disregard. And I've seen many environments where feedback is not delivered well and it's not received well. So there probably isn't one thing today that you're saying, okay, this one thing is going to fix everything. That's not the point here. It's the combination of all the things that we do that help us achieve our ultimate goal. And if you want people to receive feedback effectively, you have to practice all of this. You have to create all of this. Now, you could take out of today and say, okay, there's a couple things I want to work on right now that are going to help. I encourage that. I'd say pick one or two things that are going to help you to move forward, to be a more effective deliverer of feedback, both positive and negative, or positive and constructive. I definitely encourage that, because if you don't, then you've sat through this for very little reason other than to be entertained, perhaps. Hopefully I entertained you today a little bit. So let me just summarize, and then we can get into some questions here. I believe personally, and through my experiences and anecdotes and successes I've seen over the years, feedback really is a fuel for growth for individuals, for yourself, all right, as well, if you're receiving and giving. But it is fuel for growth for people, for teams. And when I say growth, I'm not talking about revenue growth. I'm talking professional growth. And if we create a wonderful environment for people to live in, I think everybody thrives more effectively. The second point here: communication requires purpose and intent. It does. We don't want to just speak purely through emotion or off the cuff. We have to know that, especially as managers and leaders, our words matter. They matter a ton, more than you probably recognize sometimes. So let's have purpose and intent. And always ask yourself, what outcome do I want to get? What's the best outcome? And I think that will lead you forward. We oftentimes want to avoid tough talks. They're tough because they're just difficult. They're not easy. And sometimes I don't want to hurt someone's feelings. I don't want to do it. It's too much energy. There's various reasons why not to do it. Problems, issues with people do not vanish. Do not think you sweep it under the rug and it vanishes. It does not. It stays there. And oftentimes it can fester into something bad. Deal with it, hit it early, get on it, do it well, follow the guidelines here, do it well, but it will pay you off in the long run, and you will build stronger, more healthy relationships. And as I put here, tough talks lead to triumphs. And then, of course, create a strong and healthy environment. If you think about today, one of the biggest challenges we're facing, and not just the development and growth of people, but finding the right people with the right skills, beliefs, attitudes, experience to do the job. Many of us in organizations today are bringing people in and who don't have a lot of experience, because we can't find people. So we're saying, well, we're going to have to train them. We're going to have to grow them. Well, bring them into a healthy environment where they can learn, where they can grow, and you're going to do much better in the long run. All right. That's today's session. I want to open it up for questions, answering anything here. Lori, can you do we want to open it up to anyone who wants to share, or would you like to read off some of the questions?
I have a couple of questions that have come in over the chat. Let's see. In an organization still working on living the culture we've defined, how do you encourage two employees who do not get along to have a productive feedback conversation? And what role do you like to see the supervisor or HR play in that?
Good question, because we hear that a lot. Let me start with, there's always risk when you get HR or a manager involved, because you create triangulation. And what I mean by that is, one employee goes to the manager, then the manager has to talk to the employee. That's not a healthy way to do it. You have to put the responsibility on the individuals who are struggling. Now, do you perhaps need a mediation? For instance, now if these two people are productive people, generally productive, well-meaning, reasonably open-minded, then you can bring them together in perhaps a triad of some kind to say, look, we've got to resolve this. What's happened is those two people have lost trust between one another. And you have to recognize what has caused that trust degradation. And that's really how you do it. So I would say resist bringing in a third party. but encourage each one of them to understand, okay, what's the root cause of the issue here? What's really happening? And oftentimes it's going to be fundamentally a function of that relationship, the strength, the trust and respect. And something went wrong. It wasn't one thing. It was a number of things over time. And now they've created um, a really kind of a false narrative. They have an impression in their mind, this is a bad person, I cannot trust them. And when that happens, a complete reset. Now, you might say, well, we've tried that. We've tried this, we've tried that. Then it gets a little more tricky. Is it one person or is it really both of them? And you might have to take some more dramatic actions to either split them up, let one go. I mean, again, I'm painting kind of the worst scenario here, but realistically, you cannot let two people create a dynamic that is dragging everybody down. You got to lay it out for them. But I would first say, don't go at them super hard to say, get your stuff together to say, look, let's figure out why this has happened. And it usually is what I just mentioned to related to trust. And again, if it's one of those difficult situations, then it might be HR, then it might be you as the manager. But again, try to resist that first and get them to work it out, but perhaps through your coaching and guidance individually.
We have another question here that's come in. It says, what would be your advice when building a culture within a company completely virtual, where Slack is the major communication tool?
Yeah, no, oh, that's a good one as well. Well, all right. So I mentioned earlier about culture, right? You got above the line, below the line, and where you have a truly virtual world, boy, a lot of things vanish, right? You don't see body language, you don't hear the direct tone, but you can hear tone in words. You have to be careful with that. I think you have to be more deliberate with defining what that culture is, and that requires you to talk about it as leaders, managers, saying, okay, look, if it's not healthy, if you feel things are bubbling up that are unhealthy in that environment, then I think you've got to put emphasis on, let's talk about what we want this to be. What are our values? What's important? What conduct are we expecting? And that's especially in a virtual world, because it creates, I don't want to call it a rule book, because culture is not necessarily about rules. But if you set expectations and there's general agreement among the people who are working virtually to say, this is what we are expecting from one another, then you can actually hold each other to account. So if something goes sideways or you recognize something in Slack that's like, ooh, that's not what I'm expecting. That's not the behavior. And again, you don't have to be that vigilant watching it all the time, but pay attention where are the opportunities. Or if you say, that's exactly what we're looking for, then you have to virtually, or hey, pick up the phone even. Your phone does dial out. I know they do. You could actually just provide that feedback to the individual to say, that's exactly what we want, or hey, let's talk about this. We all committed to this is what we want to do, or this is what's going to drive the best performance for the team, the environment. So you're going to have to pay attention.
Yeah, it's also so hard to interpret tone on Slack or any kind of
tone will be interpreted in writing based on the last interaction you had with the person. If you had a good interaction with the person last time, likely you're going to hear that tone. If you had a poor interaction with that person last time, that's likely going to be the tone you're going to hear, regardless of what somebody's written.
Right, right.
Any other questions?
Yeah, we have a couple more. What is the best way to handle someone who becomes verbally aggressive after receiving feedback?
Just slap them. No, don't do that. That's a joke, entire joke. Do not slap them. If they, I would say, let them vent. Don't engage them immediately. Don't dive in and start pushing back. Just let them vent. Let them vent. Hear them out. Make sure they feel validated. Now, if this is a physical thing, that's completely different. I'm thinking just a verbal. Let them vent it out, and then you'll need to ask them some questions, some probing questions, to make sure you understand their point of view. Their point of view might be off, but I think if someone becomes aggressive verbally, getting aggressive verbally back is only going to inflame. It's just going to throw gasoline on the fire. So let them calm down, and then talk through what's actually going on. Now, obviously, if I had a real situation, I could dive into it further, but that's my advice. Don't engage. Let them do their thing.
Excellent. Okay. One more, and we have a couple minutes left, so please feel free to unmute yourself and chime in, but we have one more on the chat here. How do I approach a feedback situation with someone who has already reacted poorly in the past? You've sort of answered this, but
Yeah, I think I think you have to recognize, do your homework relative to what happened in the past. Make sure you're clear and you're clear about this person, their style, their approach, where their hot buttons are. But also, if you can reach out, get some feedback on how they're feeling, what's going on. I mean, we don't know what's always going on in someone's lives, and I'm not saying we're responsible for people's lives. I mean, they have to take care of themselves. Sometimes it's just a matter of what's really going on here. What's at the root of this? And I think oftentimes we go after solving problems through symptoms, which is an issue. We have to really understand, why is this person reacting this way? Why are they not performing? What's at the root of it? And if you can do your homework and truly be objective about trying to understand that, not let your preconceived notions get in the way, then you have a better chance of addressing it and fixing it, if you want to use that term.
great. Anybody else want to chime in? We have a couple minutes left. Actually, we have like 30 seconds.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. But yes, please feel free to chime in. I know we get a lot of questions about culture and what it is and how to identify it and how to change it. It seems like such a big ship to turn. So maybe you can talk just a little bit more about culture itself and making changes to it.
Yeah. The cultural element is it takes time, right? We shape the culture over time. It comes from our own personal beliefs, our own attitudes, which moves into the world of behaviors. We have to recognize that our behaviors have a massive impact on what happens around us, and it's the collective, practices and behaviors that shape that culture. So we have to really pay attention to it, and the only person you control is you, right? But your behaviors rub off. They really do. That lead by example component. You certainly, it certainly does rub off.
Oraz, do you have a question?
Yes, good morning, David.
Morning.
Nice to see you again after a
Same.
couple of months.
Yes.
My question to you is simple. Sorry if my voice is reverberating. Racquetball coach. I was in the gym. So, anyways, if you can hear me clearly,
Yeah, go
can
ahead.
you
You're fading out a
without
little
revealing
bit.
the name of any. Sorry about that. I'm just saying that, can you tell me if you can give some example about, there was not so good communication in a small size company, such as a startup company or a company who has been in the industry for 10 years with a size of 200, 300 employees, but their products are something very unique, and they are really capturing the market in a particular region, in a particular state, let's say Alabama or Illinois, whatever. If you can talk about some story that you have heard without revealing names of any of those companies, and how you think those small size companies can mitigate this kind of issues.
Well, I guess it depends on what small means. Because I deal with all types, all size companies. I've dealt with 10-person companies. I've dealt with, many thousands of people. But, I think in terms of a small company, the examples I can give, that I think a positive example is that where the leadership, and however that's defined in a small company, they work at it. They talk amongst one another in terms of what they want. And whether it's formal discussions or informal, but they do work at it. They say, what kind of company do we want? Who do we want to be? Those are the ones where I found have the greatest cultures, because they work at it. They're not perfect, but they work at it. The ones that I find are more challenging is when it's one, they don't talk about it, but when you have one or two very powerful voices, maybe it's the owner, maybe it's the CEO, that really, their attitude permeates the culture and people don't talk about it and they tolerate the poor behavior. Those are the ones that really struggle. And I'm not saying those are bad people or bad companies. They're not, but they don't recognize, they have blind spots and they don't recognize that their behaviors are actually creating an environment they don't want. So those are the two examples that I have seen that I think represent, good case, bad case.
So just a follow-up question, you think open door policy by the top level management people that helps at times for
You mean,
anybody?
did you say open door policy?
Yes.
Yes. Well, there's a nuance that comes with that. Yes, having an open door policy is important, but they have to live up to it as well. I've had some companies saying, no, we have an open door policy, but no one dares walk through the door.
Exactly.
So, the words and actions have to match up there.
Thank you.
All right. Hey, thank you. Nice seeing you again.
Yeah.
All right, folks.
Likewise.
It's past 10. I said we'd end on time. We're a little bit over, but hey, wonderful. Thank you everyone for being here today. I enjoyed it. Hopefully it was of value to you. We've recorded the session. Everybody will get the link to the recording, and we'll also provide the PowerPoint slides so you have them for reference purposes. And of course, if you have any questions in the future, please let me know. I will be available. And if you'd like me to talk about anything relative to doing anything within your organization, I'm absolutely open to that as well. I won't be pursuing you directly, but I'll leave it up to you to reach out to me. And I hope you have a great weekend.